Hello and welcome to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm your host, Mina Rzouki, and today I'm joined by none other than Raphael Honigstein. Hello, Rafa, how are you?
Hello, Mina. How are you?
It was an exciting week of football as Germany defined defensive ineptitude. Italy were magnificent, even though they were down to 10, and Balotelli was dubbed the Ballon d'Or for his performance on the night. Meanwhile, Uruguay and Chile continue to suffer, especially with defensive problems. All that and more coming up, especially as we look ahead to the European fixtures for this weekend. But let's start off with the game that was postponed. Poland versus England. And do you think that obviously because it was postponed, there was a reason for, you know, the players saying that they didn't sleep well the night before, the English players, and that's why it was kind of a lethargic, sort of sluggish game? Do you think that was the right excuse?
Yeah, I'm not sure sleeping pills are very conducive to a game of football. If you were to take some medication, maybe you should look in a different compartment, different section for the drugs. It was a bit strange. I mean, I'm not sure the Polish players would have necessarily felt it was easier for them. Maybe being on home soil was less of a trouble, but they would have slept in a hotel. You know, they would have been up for the game and had to find ways of sort of getting the adrenaline out of the system. And
effectively their style of football, considering the fact that England didn't really pass the ball very well, and Poland was trying to create something, and a lot of it based on sometimes speed, effectively the actual rain and the pitch affected their game more. Would you argue that to be true, considering that it was both quite a negative approach, relying on counter-attacks?
I mean, it's difficult to know. I mean, England were trying to pass it. They were just very inept, and yeah, I mean, the passing was fairly atrocious. Sometimes people forget, you know, when they look at England's passing, they think, you know, why can't these players who pass the ball so well in the Premier League then pass for England? It's not as if they're worse players, it's the collective movement. Okay. That's the problem, because if you're on the ball and there's no movement, you haven't got the outlets for you to get that pass, and then what happens is that you're forced to hitting long speculative balls, and of course the percentage chance dictates that the ball will be coming back straight away. That is the big difference. The collective movement, the positioning in space is always wrong, or very often wrong with England.
Okay, but is that the players' fault, or would you say that that's Hodgson's tactics? You know, the two banks of four, the regular, you know, the same old, same old. Do you think that, would you blame that on him?
Not on him specifically. I mean, it's been a problem that England have like experienced for a few decades. But I mean, I think he's beginning to address it. I think the formation is a bit more fluid. It's not so rigid in the 4-4, especially with Cleverly, you know, playing a little bit between the lines and trying to come deep to pick up the ball. But it's, as you can tell, it's not quite working yet. And there isn't this sort of sense of automatic play that the better teams at international level have, where somebody picks up the ball and he knows exactly that guy A is running and guy B is cutting short, etc., etc. That doesn't exist with England.
There's no chemistry, no synergy.
No, and that needs to change, because as it is, they will always, I think, appear smaller than the sum of their parts. Whereas the good and better teams manage to bring out the best of their players. England, for some reason, always seem to take everyone down to the lowest common denominator, and even somebody like Rooney looks absolutely ordinary, mediocre.
Okay, just before we move on, do you think that they are just 1 point ahead of Montenegro in the group? Do you think that they can qualify, or is this going to be, this just complicate matters?
It does complicate matters, especially after the really silly home draw against Ukraine, where they were very, very poor, England. The game away to Montenegro is going to be key, just as it was in the Euro qualifiers, so you know exactly where they stand afterwards. I still expect them to top the group, simply because neither Poland nor the Ukraine, or even Montenegro, who are second at the moment, look as if they're necessarily going to win all the games. So I think England still have a decent chance.
I still fancy Montenegro, but speaking of sort of, you know, defensive negative football, Germany were the complete opposite of that, and yet they threw away a 4-goal lead. First time in their history they've ever done such a thing in their lives, and they fell apart. Now, rather than people questioning about the defensive ineptitude, blah, 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 what they keep referring to is the lack of mental strength. That's exactly what it is. And they seem to keep on, you know, Bayern Munich kept coming up as runner-up last season, and they are effectively the spine of this German side. Now, you know, Hoeneß has been talking about, you know, there's no disciplinarian in the dressing room, and Joachim Löw needs to sort of start, disciplining the team, making them answer to where the weaknesses are. Do you think that that is one of the reasons why they're not this German tough side that we used to remember from back in, 2 decades ago?
I mean, it's tempting to take that kind of psychological approach when you analyse the team's problems. I prefer, which is perhaps more sound, to stick with the tactical problems. And there is no doubt that this team is so open and so attacking that in midfield, especially the middle of the park, where you had Schweinsteiger next to Kroos, none of whom are very good at destroying the game, that there is an inherent weakness in purely tactical terms that really need to be addressing. Also, I think the way that the back four defend at times is very aggressive, with the full-backs being a little bit further up than the centre-backs, and you have these gaps, you have these spaces in between that great players like Ibrahimovic can use. I mean, his goal came out of absolutely nowhere. But it made the difference because it was a 4-1 and it gave Sweden a bit of belief. So I'm not so sure I buy into this mentality problem, frailty problem. All these players, whether Bayern or Dortmund, have won plenty of titles, they've won plenty of World Cups, and they've come through a lot of really crunch games. The problem is, unless they win something big, they'll always have that question mark. But it's a little bit like saying, Andrew Murray is a bad player because he hasn't won a title yet before he did in the US. The fact that he's coming second, third time in the world clearly suggests he's a very, very good player. So I don't necessarily think that there's a psychological problem. But what is very true is that neither Löw nor the team are very good when it comes to those crunch situations where teams throw things forward, and when they come up against street-smart players like Balotelli, like Ibrahimovic, like some of the Spanish players.
Well, look at this is the Swedish paper that came out with Thank you for 4-1, 4-2, 4-3, and then
but
it
kind of sums it up, because it's not. I mean, Sweden were great that they had that belief and then they pulled it back, but Germany threw it away, and they're saying thank you, Germany, for throwing this game away, because they'd won the game 3 or 4 times over, and at times it looked as if it's going to be double figures. I mean, they were playing kind of football that I have never seen from Germany in terms of the combination and the attacking moves.
Yeah, but this is it. This is what I've always noticed with that, is that, you're right. I mean, I think that at the time they took Hedera off, against, was it Ireland, and Kroos came on and obviously scored 2 goals. So it was like, yes, let's go with this attacking approach because that's what we have, so there's no need to defend because we're going to hold on to possession. But when you are facing teams like Sweden, who are very good in the sense that they have power and strength, and that they do have trickery in Ibrahimovic, then it becomes a thing, and they don't seem to have a defence that really you can rely on. There's too many holes, despite the fact that they do have world class in Neuer and I feel in Matt Hummels. But Pat Stuber was out of position the entire time. Boateng surely is not the best that Germany has to offer. Is Joachim Löw not really looking at others and just going with the spine of Bayern Munich, or is he really trying to find another solution for that right back? Because surely this is not the best that you can find.
No, I mean, Lahm is usually the right back. He had to play left back because Schmelzer was injured.
Because he was criticised as well for his performance.
Yeah, but he doesn't like Schmelzer either. So, yeah, I mean, the fullback position, the second fullback position has been a problem that's been dogging this team for 6-7 years. There's always Philipp Lahm plus another, and the other is nowhere near as good as he is. But what can Löw do? I mean, he can't invent these players. What he did try quite successfully was to make Lars Bender, who's a holding midfielder, into a makeshift left back. But Bender was injured, as was his brother, so he couldn't play and he wasn't available. The other thing is, what is a valid criticism of his is that he's so concerned with developing sort of the fine art and fine-tuning attacking moves, really the most difficult stuff in the world that very few teams can do, that he's forgotten to look at the real basics and sort of the A to Z of normal football. What you do when a long ball comes in, where do you position yourself as a back four?
Running before walking.
Exactly.
Oh, well, Italy don't know anything about that, because I think what they did the basics terrifically well against Denmark, and they won, of course, 3-1, largely thanks to, firstly, Denmark having no idea how to attack forward despite possessing the ball for long periods of the game. Italy were down to 10 for the entire second half because of Pablo Osvaldo's silly red card. But it was Balotelli that shone on the night. And he sort of finally played the kind of game that everyone had been hoping for. You know, he led the line, he used his vision, he did the assist for the goal, he scored his own wonderful one with a toe poke, and more than that, he was contributing defensively. Do you think this is something that we can start to expect from Balotelli? Is it finally working? All of this criticism, all of these public urgings from Cesare Prandelli to start taking responsibility?
You'd like to think so, but then, you know, a lot of people thought that the Germany game was a turning point in his career, and this is almost 6 months ago, and people are still sort of waiting for him to do it on a regular basis, both for Italy and for City.
This is sort of the first game that he's played as a qualifier.
True, but, you know, I mean, Prandelli was afterwards saying he has to play like that all the time.
Yes.
The moment when a coach, whether at club level or international level, stops saying these things because it's taken as a given that a player like this plays at the time, then he's truly arrived. But as, you know, as long as there is the sense that he's not really doing it regularly enough and is not consistent enough and is too much of a risk at times and sometimes not in the mood or he's got the hump or whatever, then you'll always have that problem with him. And it's perhaps a little bit easier for somebody like Prandelli to manage him because as a national manager, the power comes from being able to call up a player or not. So you really have to perform, and you know you have to perform once a month or once every couple of months, otherwise you're out. Whereas with Mancini, he is stuck with the guy very much, and he needs to work with him on a weekly basis, and it's obviously much more difficult to get that kind of performances out of him.
Yeah, but it's that rotating thing that no one ever feels special, barring really Sergio Aguero, because otherwise in City you're never really guaranteed a space if you're an attacker. There's too much talent.
Yeah, that's true, and you wonder if Balotelli can ever really adjust it, because he, I think, as you said, he needs to feel special, a little bit like you.
That's because Ralph was going through my pictures and he thinks I'm a poser now. Anyway, let's. I do like to feel special. Let's go on to the fact that there's Denmark. In the first 15 minutes, they held possession. They used their physical strength, and they really pushed. They really pushed Italy, you know, pressing high up the pitch. And for those first 15 minutes, you really showed exactly how you can exploit the Italian flaws in their game. So physicality as well as, you know, pace tends to make them struggle. Is that going to be one of their weaknesses that won't see them go very far when it comes to the World Cup, or do you think that's something that they can overcome?
I mean, the World Cup is still a long while away, and you just wonder how somebody like Pirlo will turn up in you know, in 16 months' time. I think that is the bigger worry. Can they actually get him to perform at the same level another almost 2 years down the line? So
basically, you think they're reliant on him?
Yeah, because if you press Italy, then the way they come out is having that guy in the number 6 who's always available and who can hold on to the ball even when he's pressed. And if that guy isn't there, then they struggle because they haven't really got that many technical players in midfield. They've got a lot of very good sort of 6 out of 10 players, but they haven't got
Marco Verratti.
Yeah. Well, he's still very young. I'd like to see him do what he does at PSG for Italy.
Yeah, that's true. Well, then you've got, you know, Spain. We move on to them, and they have, you know, a wealth of talent. And in fact, if anything, Sergio Busquets went against, you know, his prime role of using a double defensive midfielder in Sergio Busquets and Xabi Alonso. Puts Busquets back in central defence, pushes Xabi Alonso as the only guy in midfield surrounded by creative talent, and we saw the damage.
Yeah, it was one step too far because Spain without the ball are very, very vulnerable. You want to talk about Italy, you know, having a problem with pressing. Spain, if they haven't got the ball,
defensively weak.
Yeah,
no Puyol,
because they're not
no
used to it. I mean, it's an extreme, slightly more extreme version of Germany because their game is so much about possession and so much about pressing the opposition and just dealing with the occasional long ball over the top that they're not used to coming under concerted pressure when they actually don't have the ball. And what they did so well in the second half was to bring on Valbuena, and they really changed it from a 4-3-3 to a 4-2-3-1. And it's very subtle in a way because on paper it looks like, well, there's just one guy slightly further up. But that guy further up put direct pressure on Xabi Alonso, and all of a sudden they kept losing the ball, and France crucially won it a lot higher up the pitch, and put some real pressure, especially with Ribery playing well on the left, and they attacked Juan Fran, and Valbuena was going left as well. So, I mean, it was a great tactical decision at half-time from France, and for once you can see that
Spain were exposed.
But being a bit courageous. And, you know, in doing something that's counterintuitive, i.e. taking off a holding midfielder and putting on an attacking midfielder, can actually change the game because you are defending higher up the pitch and at the same time become a lot more of a threat.
Yeah, that is true, and I think that Deschamps did a wonderful job with his substitutions in the second half. But that's all we have from the European qualifiers. After the break, we take a trip to South America in keeping with our title. After all, we are the World Football Show. We'll see you in a few. Hello and welcome back to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. Now we're over to South America, and of course Argentina played and Messi was spectacular, as we would imagine. Although actually Gab Marcotti wrote a wonderful article on ESPN in which he said that Ronaldo had scored more decisive goals in 2012 than Messi.
Yeah, whatever.
Oh, that was your 2 cents worth. Okay. But did you see, everyone is fascinated by Messi. Did you see this wonderful picture with him and the linesman? Is that a wonderful definition of professionalism?
Yeah, especially if you do it before the game, I think he did. I mean, yeah.
Is that just like putting your foot into it, like saying, like, you know what, we're just... And this comes at the same time that Jose Mourinho said that he enjoys so much protection from referees.
Yeah, I mean, lots of clubs have criticised their players when they seem to be too eager during Champions League matches, for example, to swap shirts with him. You had this whole thing with Leverkusen when they were beaten, I don't know, 5-0 or whatever, and the players all were queuing up and thinking about who's getting Messi's shirt. I mean, this is probably worse, because as an official, you have to at least pretend you're impartial and not sort of, you know, be desperate to have a shot. And he probably told him it's for his kids or whatever, but we all know that this is going to be on his mantelpiece.
So, this is actually what he said afterwards. I really don't know why it's being talked about so much. He's so confused by the controversy. The referees, we are part of the footballing environment, and I don't see where there is a problem. I also had a photo with Alexis Sanchez, who is also a Chilean international idol, Barcelona player and teammate of Messi. Maybe he's just a huge Barcelona fan.
Yeah. Which is okay if it's international football and there's enough players from both sides on the pitch.
Well, I don't know. But anyway, speaking of Argentina, they are, of course, at the top of the table and doing a splendid job in destroying all their opponents, and they won 2-1 against Chile, who've been suffering of late, especially with behavioural issues, 3 red cards or something in 2 games, as well as their coach obviously being sidelined because of the controversy in the match against Venezuela. But we've got Joel with us, who's our South American correspondent. Sorry, we don't actually have Joel, we have Daniel instead. Hello, Daniel, can you hear us?
Hello, guys. Yep, I can hear you perfectly.
Perfect. All right. Do you think that the way that Argentina took this game against Chile, do you think that they were a little bit lucky at first, considering how well their opponents were on the wings, considering Argentina sometimes have quite a narrow midfield?
I agree, yeah. I mean, what we saw against Chile, especially in kind of first 20 minutes, was exactly what we saw all game against Peru, you know. These teams overload on the wings, and they know that Argentina are weak there. They've got a very strong team, but the weakness is definitely down at fullback. I mean, they had on Tuesday Hugo Campagnaro and Pablo Zabaleta playing, and both of them left a lot to desire. And yeah, they definitely rode their luck. I mean, Sergio Romero made some excellent saves early on, and Chile really should have taken advantage of the chances. But then you just saw, you know, Argentina got the chance, and with Messi and Higuain, they're going to punish any team that gives them the chance. So, all in all, it was a very good result. They're looking extremely good to qualify now. But yeah, I think moving on and looking a bit further on to 2014, that kind of defence out wide is going to be a worry still.
Daniel, we've heard a lot about Messi being given the captaincy and how that's really changed the dynamic in the team, and he's suddenly a lot more confident. But what has Alejandro Sabella done tactically to bring out the most of him? Because we know that for so many years, you know, the criticism has been Messi can't do it for Argentina, when everyone overlooked that tactically Argentina were usually fairly shambolic and just not a team. Why are they much more of a team, and why can they give him now the platform to do his things?
I think tactically Sabella has to take a lot of credit for this, because Messi's playing in a very similar team as he was under Maradona and under under Batista kind of personnel-wise. But what Sabella's done is really kind of say, right, we've got this fantastic attack. We have to use it. He plays, you know, Messi, Higuain, and Agüero up front, which is an incredible front three in any books, and also Di Maria, who plays nominally in midfield, but he's almost another striker. And I think for me, the real difference has been the presence of Agüero, who was kind of in and out of the team under the last two coaches, because, you know, he's very young still, but under Sabella, he's really had some game time. And I know in the Argentine press, I think it was very well respected journalist here, Juan Barsky, who made the comparison. At the moment, if Messi's kind of Argentina's Michael Jordan, then Agüero is their Scottie Pippen. Kind of that partnership is just, it works brilliant for both of them. Agüero takes a lot of the creative pressure off Messi, and he lets him kind of search for the ball where he wants, and there's still going to be that attacking threat up the top. So I think that's where it's really been the difference. Like the introduction of Agüero and that kind of three-man partnership up front is just been fantastic for Messi and for Argentina.
Yeah, I do notice that Gago also tends to supply quite a lot to Messi and makes it a little bit more simple for the Argentine to actually shine in the games. But I want to talk a little bit about Chile, because at the moment they're not doing as well as we had hoped. You know, obviously they were a terrific force under Bielsa, but now under Claudio Borghi, there seems to be sort of a separation within the side. The defence plays a little too deep, and of course they're not exactly the best defenders that they have. Vidal was stuck in a sort of a midfield attacking role, and he didn't know how to interpret that very well, contributing to tactical imbalance. Do you think that Chile don't really have a chance of qualifying, and that showed sort of against Argentina as well as the others that they've been losing with all the red cards?
Well, I think especially for that match just gone on Tuesday, Vidal was unavailable because he got red carded against Ecuador on Friday. I think Contreras, another central defender, who's very important. And you definitely saw the issue for Chile is at the back. They were playing with kind of three defenders whose primary function is to go forward and attack, and one defender who, you know, was pretty exposed. The offside line was a mess, and there was kind of no real cohesion between the four. But looking forward, they still got a decent chance of qualifying if they can put it together. They're level on points at the moment with Uruguay and Venezuela. They're all on 12 points, I believe, in 4th, 5th, and 6th. Obviously, the top four go automatically to Brazil, and the fifth will go into a playoff. So I don't think there's any reason to panic just yet. But come March, you know, when the World Cup qualifiers start again, they're going to need to pick up some victories and fast. Otherwise, they're going to run the risk, especially with Venezuela having come on so far in the last 4 years. You know, it's not going to be easy. They've got to win some games and fast.
Yeah. Daniel, briefly, if you could, is it time for Uruguay though to panic, because they lost again, heavy defeat in Bolivia, and they look not like a team who's going to be qualifying for the next World Cup at the moment?
No, against Bolivia, you know, there's no way to put too fine a point on it. It was a shambles for Uruguay. I mean, we always say that playing in La Paz at nearly 4,000 metres of altitude, it's never easy for a visiting team. But even so, we're talking about a team that's the Copa America champions, and a team that finished 4th in the World Cup 2 years ago, with essentially the same group of players that are still playing now. And yeah, it's got to be a worry. I think good teams don't become bad teams overnight, but Uruguay are definitely reaching a stage. They've got an aging squad, and I think people like Forlan and Lugano, they're starting to show their age, definitely. And I think in this kind of 5-month, 6-month interval between the qualifiers, they've got to look at where they can start rebuilding the team and where these games are being lost. Because also, we're not talking about narrow defeats. There was 4-0 against Colombia, then 3-0 against Argentina, and then 4-1 against Bolivia. Like, this is a team that doesn't concede goals, and at the moment they're
defensively inept. All right, okay, I'm going to have to let you go, Daniel. Thank you so much for your expert knowledge on South American football. I was a little bit shocked about Uruguay and their defensive failures. I mean, they've got 4 out of their 7 games remaining are away from home. They've conceded 7 in their last 2 matches, 11 in their last 3 away matches. Definitely need to reconstruct, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, their whole game is built on defence and then having one or two individualists up front, and it doesn't quite work at the moment. Forlan is probably playing the worst football of his career, or probably as bad as he has done since he left Manchester United. And you saw what Diego Lugano did against Argentina. His head isn't quite in the game, and he looks frustrated. Doesn't really provide that solidity. Perhaps they have to repeat what they did 2 years ago. They needed the playoffs against Costa Rica to even get to South Africa. Then they really played well. Maybe they need to fumble through again and muddle it through, and then concentrate on the competition. Maybe
Suarez will get confused again and we'll have netball. But after the break, we'll be heading to North America, continuing our tour of world football. So we'll see you in a bit. Take care. Hello and welcome back to the World Football Show. I'm still your host, I'm Mina Rzouki, and I'm still joined by Raphael Honigstein. But now we're moving on to North America, because in the MLS, we've got a city that's embracing soccer just as they should be. And of course, it is Seattle and their team, Seattle Sounders. We've got with us Mackenzie Clark, who's from the Emerald City supporters, huge fan, who can tell us more about the rise in the average attendance of the actual fans coming to the stadium and how the team has been doing so far. Can you hear me, Mackenzie?
Yes, I can.
So tell me more about this. There's the average attendance, 42,000, really?
That's correct. These numbers have just really boistered over the last 2 years, and part of it is just because Seattle Sounders joined Major League Soccer for the first time in 2009. Before that, we had been playing in USL, which is kind of the equivalent of the second division here in the United States. It's kind of a little confusing below first division the last few years, but after making the jump to the first division, the city has just really embraced the team.
Is there something about Seattle as a city that makes them so susceptible to soccer, or is it really the club and the team doing something very special to create that special bond?
It's actually both. In the Pacific Northwest, in Washington specifically, I think we actually have the most youth soccer participants in the country, which is a pretty massive thing to consider when you've got states like California and New York have so many more people than the state of Washington. So when you consider the fact that we have this really massive youth program of all these kids playing soccer on every field you can possibly find around the area, and the fact that the team just has this very quality infrastructure that's kind of based out of just this demand for excellence and the desire to win. And it's just a winning formula.
What about your hopes for the playoffs? How do you think the team will do on that occasion when it comes to actually trying to win trophies?
Unfortunately, the Sounders have tended to fall flat in the playoffs, but the hope is always to win the MLS Cup, and I think we have a roster that is fully capable of being champions this year, and we just hope that we will be able to deliver.
Is that because it's based on defensive solidity, or do you think that is that what's carrying them through at the moment?
I think at the moment it's because we have a very attacking side. We have the likes of Freddie Montero, who's proven to be a consistent goal scorer over the last few years. But we've also seen the return of Eddie Johnson to a very good club and just overall professional form. He's kind of fallen flat after he departed the U.S. for Europe. But, just this week he's made a return to national team form and kind of sent the U.S. on to the next round of World Cup qualifying. So, we've been scoring goals, and between the two of them, I think we will be in a good spot.
Mackenzie, we've heard about the U.S. Taking a liking to soccer for many years now, and a lot of people always talk about the participation at youth level, how it's really becoming a much more popular sport, that the middle class society like to get their kids into playing soccer rather than the much more dangerous games like American football, for example. So is this now, is the watershed being reached now? Are we really seeing the point where soccer is establishing itself as a genuine popular sport at a similar level like the other sports? Or are we still a few years away from that?
We are still a few years away from seeing that growth and that exponential growth into a formidable opponent or competitor in the national sports arena here in the United States. But I would say that at this point in time, it is the most exciting time to be a soccer fan in the United States, because I think the next few years will show whether or not we will become or blossom into one of those leagues that is just really competitive for the TV market and the fan market. We are starting to see a point where we are getting nationally broadcast games, and we've even heard rumors that Sounders are selling more merchandise than half the teams in the NFL, the National Football League, which, as empty as that statistic may seem, that is absolutely staggering. So if it's getting to the point where teams are selling more jerseys than American football teams, and if we're selling out our games better than American baseball teams, I mean, only time will tell if we continue with that growth.
Wow, selling more merchandise than the NFL. That's amazing. I would never thought that was possible a few years ago. But thank you so much, Mackenzie. I know that you're in a rush to get on with your day, so we'll let you go. And then we can move on to, obviously, the recent violence in the under-21 game between Serbia and England. And, of course, Serbia has come out since and said that it denies anything, and it called Danny Rose vulgar and his behaviour unsportsmanlike. Do you think that, I mean, is Serbia ever going to learn their lesson when it comes to hooliganism, considering that we've seen what happened in 2010 when they faced Italy, and of course, you know, same things happened, but this was in a match against Italy. Game got called off. Italy got handed a 3-0 win. We saw this before in 2007, under 21 level against England. Should they actually start? Should they just be banned?
I don't think it's reached that point yet where you should really ban them. I mean, as bad as the under-21s were, my feeling was, or my sense was, not having been there, just seeing some of the video footage, that you're still talking about a group of maybe 100, 200 in a whole stadium. That's still 100 and 200 too many, but I'm not sure you can definitely
ban an entire country.
Yeah, ban an entire country. But what will undoubtedly happen, and what must happen, is another game, maybe 2 or 3 behind closed doors, really hitting them hard when it comes to ticket money, perhaps even another point deduction. But I'm not sure you can necessarily say that Serbian football on a whole now needs to sort of go where England went in 1985 after Heysel. You know, violence is one thing. Racist attitudes on the stands, as bad as it is, are quite another, because I think here it's more about educating people, getting them to understand just how unacceptable their behaviour is, because unfortunately most of them will have grown up in an environment where it's just seen as a normal funny thing to do.
You know what, listen, I agree with you, because I think that generally and they complain about this themselves, the Serbians, that they feel like people sort of prejudge them because of their, you know, horrific past and the recent wars and everything to do with that. They are unfairly judged, always thought to be sort of violent, intolerant of people, or whatever it be. But and of course then there's been the occasions to do with football, when it was against Italy, when it was against England before. But you have to say that, you know, whilst I agree with the whole country not being blamed for this, surely the fact that their FA has come out and said, you know, along the lines of, we deny that anything has happened, we don't see, you know, what the whole fuss about, them not taking responsibility, not looking to actually be trying to address the problem, not saying this is what we aim to do. Maybe that is the reason why they should be banned, more because of how they're dealing with this. You know that this is how people look at you. You know that you're being judged around the world. There's heavy pressure on UEFA to deal with the racism. Surely you should try to come out and look like you're interested in changing this, or at least take responsibility.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, that it starts from the top, and if there isn't enough of an effort, and we've seen this throughout Europe, if the authorities, whoever you know, whether it's UEFA or the local FAs, are not interested, then this behaviour will continue. But to be fair to them, they have, since that first terrible, clumsy, fairly offensive statement that they've put out, also offered a qualified apology from the Serbian FA. So I think they're beginning to realise just how damaging this incident has been, and how inept their handling of the situation has been. Yeah. And I'm sure that behind the scenes, both FIFA and UEFA are actually coming down quite hard on them. Whether we've reached a stage of banning them, I'm not so sure. I still think that, you know,
it's a bit harsh.
Verbal violence, as it were, racism, doesn't warrant that much of a punishment. But we have to get to the point where they must realise it's just unacceptable.
It is unacceptable. But now that we've sort of gone from North America, South America, let's move on to Africa. and a country that did take responsibility for the recent rioting that had their country thrown out of the Africa Cup of Nations in their game against the Ivory Coast. That is Senegal. Now, always packed with stars. For some reason, they just don't know how to do it when it comes to these big games in Africa. And of course, you know, after all the rioting, the match was suspended. Ivory Coast offered the 2-0 win. They go through, and Senegal don't.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the cynical point to look at it is to say it's great news for Newcastle because they won't lose their...
Actually, that's every article that I read. It was like, great news for Newcastle. And I'm like, hello, let's look at the wider problem.
Yeah, but that's perhaps a very fairly narrow English-centric way to look at it. No, I mean, it's an open shut case. You have a pitch invasion, the game wasn't even finished. Of course you have to forfeit the game. Of course you're going to get knocked out. And I think the wider problem, as you said, or the wider issue is not just how do you keep the fans off the pitch, which, you know, any stadium in the world should be able to do, but how can you get this team of great individuals play like a team and get to the sort of level that we saw in 2002, for example. So that's where they're falling short. That's where they really need to address the issues. And they're, I think, still a sort of an ordinary international side where the coach, whoever it is, and as you know, we've had coaches changes all the time, just pick 11 players and then kind of expect them to sort it out themselves because they're all great players. And I don't think that football at any level, football at any level doesn't work like that anymore. Maybe in Sunday
league. We saw that with Argentina and Maradona.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you need an idea. You need to know what kind of football you want to play, and you need to practice specific things. You can't just no longer just take the simple route of picking 11 good players and thinking they'll somehow find a way to beat the other 11 guys. They need to have more, and maybe.
So you don't think Harry Redknapp would work with them, huh?
Yes, I don't know. Maybe that game, even though it ended with things that have nothing to do with football as such, were given a bit of an impetus to look a little bit deeper at their issues because they need to develop as a team and as a footballing country.
Instead of getting angry with the referee, you should really look at the fact why they were losing 2-0 anyway. I mean, but hopefully Senegal will get their act together in time for the one after that in 2014. But do join us after the break and we'll be looking ahead to the European matches coming up this weekend. We'll see you in a bit. Hello and welcome back to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. Now we're going to look ahead to the European matches that take place this weekend. And of course, the huge one is the derby in Germany between Borussia Dortmund and Schalke. Now, this should be a game that is eagerly anticipated, I understand, in the Bundesliga. Surely every game is like that. There's just so many of these.
No, but this is the biggest derby there is.
The most heated one.
Yeah, they absolutely hate each other. They're local rivals. They've had a history of sort of
violence.
Doing damage. No violence. A bit of violence, but more
nothing
doing damage on the pitch to each other's hopes. And Schalke, I think, feel that they can really plunge Dortmund into some kind of depression because they've had a very indifferent start, as you know, in the league. And this is a tough time for them to be facing Schalke because they've also got Real Madrid on Wednesday. So it's really a little bit geared towards the Royal Blues at this stage. And I think they feel that after 2 years where they had to look on, Dortmund winning first the title and then the double, which hurt them so much because they haven't won anything in 50 years as far as the championship is concerned. Now they perhaps can put them into their box a little bit and at least become the second force as far as this titles race is concerned behind Bayern.
Well, you see, now the Schalke's chairman came out to say that whoever thinks that Bayern Munich will not win the league is detached from reality and is dreaming. Do you think he's being a little bit harsh on Dortmund? They've only played 7 games and they already have 2 points more than that the stage last season, which they started quite terribly, to be honest. But do you think that it's all a bit too much, considering it's still very early days?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit early to make these giant sweeping statements. We know that Bayern have a tricky game themselves away to Düsseldorf. Have been so resolute in the defence, hardly letting in any goals. So they haven't won that game yet. No one's ever won 8 games in a row. So, the history suggests that they're not going to keep up that run forever.
No one's ever done that before. So they could be breaking records this weekend then.
Yeah. But even if they do break the records, everyone's going to look at the derby instead. And the big story there is that Mario Götze will be out. Also, Błaszczykowski, of course, is not there. And all of a sudden, a very good squad looks a little bit thin, especially with the Champions League. And that's always been Dortmund's problem. They're so intense. They play such an energetic game that takes out so much out of them and the opposition. Can they keep it up on both levels? And now with one or two players getting injured, you wonder if they have got enough. And Klopp, I think, for once, is under serious pressure because he doesn't like losing, and he's been losing it a little bit
Going a bit too emotional, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if they have to give up sort of a great performance against one of these sides, they've got Real Madrid coming up, who have their own injury problems in the sense that they haven't really got a fullback at the moment. So Arbeloa is likely to miss the upcoming match in the league. You've got Marcelo out, Coentrao out. God knows what they're going to do on that occasion. Maybe this is the perfect time to face Dortmund. But considering that, if they have to put in a subpar performance, which would they likely do that against? They won't.
No, it's just not an option. I mean, remember when Real Madrid played Barcelona in between the two semi-finals against Bayern Munich? It absolutely killed them and killed also Barcelona to a certain extent. I mean, they couldn't beat Chelsea. It's a similar scenario. They cannot lose the game at Schalke. I mean, at home to Schalke. Maybe a draw would be seen as acceptable, and maybe because they're a much better side still, you know, they don't have to give 100% to win the game, so they're still, in my book, favourites. But Schalke feel that they can at least get a draw, and a draw with the way that Dortmund have played so far and the points that they've been taking or dropping, I should say, is going to be a little bit of a disappointment. So Schalke will play for the draw, and Dortmund will have to play for the win regardless.
Okay, well, there's going to be a lot of attention on Jermaine Jones just because this is the first time he's going to be facing Royce, who's been spectacular, by the way, since stamping on his foot deliberately. I don't think you should know how to say that game. During a cup match in 2011. So do you think that everyone's going to be concentrating on that, and will they act like gentlemen, shake hands?
Well, Jermaine Jones isn't really your gentleman type. I mean, that's not really his game, and you know, not everyone can be a gentleman.
He's getting
on
a bit. Maybe he's going to grow up in his old age.
I think, yeah, he's becoming a bit more experienced, perhaps also a little bit slower to catch people. But he said that he's going to find a different way to stop Royce this time. I mean, you'd hope so, because it didn't
it
didn't really work out for him because he was suspended for quite a few weeks. And
a few matches, no?
Yeah. I mean, you wonder how much they really come up against each other, because he's a holding midfielder. Royce would play on the left, would probably terrorise the right back a little bit. And Schalke, of course, have also one big injury problem, Papadopoulos, who's been so strong for them, has had big offers in the summer from really big clubs for huge money. He'll be out injured, so they're going to be a little bit susceptible, and they'll need Jones and everyone else to be defensively on their game.
Okay, moving on to Italy, and of course this is the match that everyone's looking forward to on the Italian calendar, and that is Juventus versus Napoli, simply because they both sit at the top of Serie A, joint level on points. And there's been a lot of conspiracy theories about this.
So unusual for Italy.
Really, isn't it? It's just, you would never expect that from the Italians. They're such pragmatic people. Now, this will be a big moneymaker for Juve. Now, according to expectations, they should bring in more than 1.7 million from ticket receipts. That's huge for an Italian club. So they're looking to pack that out. It was sold out. All the remaining tickets were sold out within 2 hours. Now, the conspiracy theories. Some said that Prandelli gave Juventus a sort of a different type of warm-up technique so that they didn't get burned out for their match against Juventus, because obviously he's a Juventus fan, against Napoli rather. And others saw the fact that Vidal got a red card against Ecuador. He did that on purpose so he wouldn't play Argentina and be fit for Napoli. Goran Pandev got a second yellow card in the Macedonian match against Croatia on the 90th minute, and some so that he'd be suspended for the one against Serbia. Again, lots of conspiracy theories. Did he do that on purpose? And Buffon, of course, is the main one, with Marotta, Beppe Marotta, the director of Juve, coming out and saying he's, Italy captain, he's Juventus captain. Let's not be so absurd to think that he's not going to play a game, so he'd be on top of it for Napoli. Do you think any of this is true, or do you think it's just people loving to fill tabloid columns with this?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Every single suggestion doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't
whatsoever.
make any sense.
No. I mean, do you really think that Vidal will be sent off for his country, who need him so desperately, against Argentina, so that he can play another league game?
And they already lost one of their players. You know, they'd already gone down to 10. They went down to 9 with Vidal as well.
Yeah, and Buffon is not like... I mean, if Buffon was a 19-year-old kid who desperately wanted to win his first title in Serie A, and he'll do anything in the world to win that first title ever, yeah, maybe. But, I mean, come on. Another Napoli game to him, what is that? And I don't think that he would have ever said, no, you know, I don't want to play Denmark because I've got Napoli coming up in 4 days' time. It's ridiculous.
It's not even something, it's a grudge match or anything like the one against Inter. It is a hard clash because it's Napoli, the only side that has beaten Juventus in the last year and a half in the Coppa Italia. But let's look at that. On the basis of looking at both of these teams, who do you think has the edge?
Well, for me, always Juventus, simply because they are more reliable in the way they play. I think Napoli have a great style, and you know they can be absolutely fantastic on the night. The way they can switch from defence to attack, and with a really flexible system. You never know really, even if they line up 3-5-2, you never really know if it's in fact a 3-4-3, or you know they can change things up right through the game. But Juve are more like a machine. But machines tend to win.
Well, you sound like Cassano, who said that there's just soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, historically, that's how Juventus have won the titles, with kind of soldier football. I don't think anyone can.
As Bonucci said, it's professionalism, it's not soldiers.
Yeah, well, professionalism also, also when it comes to the medical side of things,
okay,
as we know.
let's not start with Morgan's theories, shall we?
But no, look, I mean, you know me, I like Juventus in the sense that I think what they're doing is absolutely brilliant. They're not the most aesthetically pleasing side in Europe, but they know what to do and they play with this energy. And
but it's interesting
I think there's beauty. No, I really think there is beauty, and there's a sort of a wonder in the way that collectively defend and then attack. I think it's brilliant what they do, and I think that regardless of 1 or 2 people missing or being out of form, I would always make them favourites at home against Napoli.
But it's interesting you said that they're not aesthetically beautiful, because last season when you watched them, they were very pleasing on the eye because of what you were saying, that they're a collective unit. This season there's a lot more long balls, there's sort of less energy in the pressing game, which has made them sort of
they've got the Dortmund problem, I think, in many ways, that they are playing Champions League and suddenly feel, energy. You know, where's my whole week of preparation gone? It's not there anymore because you play every other day.
And there's no Antonio Conte on the sidelines who's there to remind them, you know, of what they're meant to be doing.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Loss.
I mean, he doesn't have to be there for 90 minutes. I mean, they know what they're doing. It's not...
Well, this is the thing. I think he really does, and I think that they felt that against Shakhtar Donetsk, you know, because as much as I, you know, value Carrera, he is an angry man and he knows how to shout at them. He doesn't have that sort of encouraging words that Conte does have, but sadly I cannot ramble about this as much as possible because my producer's like, stop talking for once. So I am going to stop talking. Thank you so much, Rafa, for joining me on. Did you enjoy yourself?
Of course, always.
As always. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week with the same time, same place, same football chat. We'll see you then.